Hello, good day, and welcome to Exploring Spirituality Through Different Pathways. My name is Dr. Liyakat Takim, and I'll be your host for this series of program, which will run for 2 days, that is today and next Sunday, June the 6th. Essentially, what we are engaged in is what we may call dialogue, although there are more than two people talking. The word dialogue comes from the word dia, D-I-A, which means to see through others through their own lenses rather than ours. Dialogue means to learn and appreciate their worldview rather than impose ours on the others. It's an attempt to enter the heart of the partner in dialogue. The purpose of this series of programs is to explore spirituality through different pathways. It is to learn and educate ourselves about spirituality in different faith traditions. That is how others connect with their own inner self. This program is organized by two interfaith groups, Mosaic and the Organization of Islamic Learning, acronym OIL. Before I introduce our panelists, I would first like to invite the presidents of these two institutions to address us. First, I would like to invite Mr. Abdulaziz Devji, who is the president of the Organization of Islamic Learning, to introduce the organization. Thank you, Abdulaziz.
Greetings. Greetings on behalf of the Organization for Islamic Learning. I take this opportunity to welcome all our viewers. A special thank you to Fran Isaacs, the co-chair of the Mosaic Interfaith, for her coordinated efforts with Dr. Liyakat Takim to make this event possible. I'd like to acknowledge Raza and Nazmuldamji for the brainstorming sessions with our director, Noura Lane. Thank you. As for the panelists, we say, let it be inspirational towards the path of awakening, as the language of spirituality is one from the heart. Dr. Liyakat Takim, from the board of directors, and myself, thank you for taking the lead for this event. May you all stay blessed always. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdulaziz. Now I call upon Fran Isaacs to say something about Mosaic and the program that she has helped to arrange.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Fran Isaacs, and I co-chair Mosaic Interfaith with my friend Shabni Suji. Mosaic Interfaith is excited to again partner with the Organization for Islamic Learning and to welcome back Kim Wheatley, Anishinaabe cultural consultant, ancestral knowledge keeper, and traditional grandmother. I'm sure that we are all heartbroken about the discovery of the remains of the 215 Indigenous children in Kamloops and send our heartfelt sympathy. Mosaic was officially named in 1980 and is one of the longest continually running interfaith groups in the GTA. Our mission has always been to offer opportunities for dialogue and to explore other faiths so that we can learn from and understand our different pathways to God. The more we learn, the more we are aware that we are all striving to emulate God by pursuing justice and helping to heal the brokenness of the world. We are delighted to have this opportunity to bring you a two-part series on spirituality, which we hope will give you insights into how our different faiths approach this aspect of trying to improve ourselves and have a closer, meaningful relationship with God. We hope that you will find the presentations enlightening and inspiring. Please enjoy this afternoon. Thank you. Back to you, Dr. Takim.
Thank you very much, Fran. In today's program, we will have speakers from the Zoroastrian, Christian, and Sikh traditions. Each of these speakers will present on spirituality within their own tradition for a maximum of 20 minutes each. After these three presentations, we'll have a short break, which will include a question and answer session based on the presentations. And after the question and answer session, then there'll be two further presentations from the Jewish and Buddhist traditions before we wrap up today's program with another Q&A session. We will be done by 4:30 p.m. Over the next 2 weeks, we will have a total of 8 presenters. 5 will be presenting today, 3 will present next Sunday. Each speaker, as I said, will have 20 minutes to make their presentation. Next Sunday, we'll have presentations from 3 more faith groups, the Islamic, Hinduism, and the First Nation community. Next week, following the presentations, all of the 8 speakers will be giving a brief summary of their talks, which will be followed by a panel of Q&A session. A word or two about how you may ask any questions that you may have. Please use the chat format to write down your questions. You can do this at any time during the presentation. Please make sure that you tell us who your question is directed to. Due to time constraints, please keep your question short and address it to one panelist only. You cannot use chat for chatting with somebody else. Chats are only for questions only. Also, for those who are watching on YouTube, you may ask questions by email. Email to be sent to questions@islamiclearning.org. That is questions@islamiclearning, one word, islamiclearning.org. Also, please make sure that you are muted at all times. These sessions are being recorded and will be made available on YouTube. Before I turn to the panelists, just a few words about Islamic spirituality and spirituality in general, for that matter. Most faith traditions have some kind of rituals, rites, mass, or acts of worships. Sometimes these acts can be too repetitious, whereby the essence of a religion is lost. Many people feel there is a need for a transition from the ritual to the spiritual, from the outside to the inside, and then to the inside of the inside. Spirituality then is an inner yearning, a passion to connect with the ultimate reality. Most people tend to think that we are human beings who sometimes have a spiritual experience. I disagree. We are actually spiritual beings having a human experience, because from the spiritual world we came, and there we shall return. In between these two spiritual worlds, we're having a very temporary, transient human experience. Spirituality also means to attain consciousness of the presence of the divine or ultimate reality, and to attempt to be at one with that reality, however we may define it. Why are we talking about spirituality? Because spirituality is a current which is universal. In fact, I would argue that all human beings are spiritual in nature. Importantly, the purpose of this series of programs is not to judge as to who is right or who is wrong. We should not be judging what is correct and what is incorrect. Rather, the purpose of this program is an attempt to understand and appreciate the diverse spiritual traditions that human beings share. It's also to realize that there are different spiritual paths which lead to that ultimate reality. To put it differently, there is unity in diversity. The panelists that you are going to hear about from just now will be discussing issues such as, what does spirituality mean within your faith practice? How is it defined? We've also asked them to talk about the salient point of the spiritual practices that a person has to observe in order to become spiritual. Are there any particular stations on the spiritual path? If so, we've asked them to briefly describe these stations. How does a person progress from one station on the spiritual path to the other? Is there a spiritual transformation in the personality of the person? So you'll hear a lot about these and other topics regarding spirituality today and next week. Our first speaker is actually from the Zoroastrian. Her name is Mobedyar Mahshad Khosraviani. Mobedyar Mahshad is an active member of both the Iranian and the Parsi communities in Toronto, Canada, and in London, England. Prior to her ordainment as a priestess, Mobedyar means a priestess, in 2012, she was teaching prayer classes, writing articles for the Zoroastrian Society of Ontario and the Huffington Post newsletter. She was also acting as a guest speaker on Radio Asia. Mobedyar Masha, remarkably, is the first Zoroastrian lady Mobedyar on the North American continent, who was officially ordained in the summer of 2012. Mobedyar Mahshad has also been endowed with the honor of becoming the youngest female Zoroastrian priestess in Iran and the first in North America, the fruitful outcome of a formidable venture. Mobedyar Mahshad has been requested to conduct numerous religious functions and communal events around the globe, including Italy, United Kingdom, America, Canada, Iran, Australia, and Germany. As you can see, she is truly an international figure. Due to prior commitments, Mobedyar Mahshadi will not be able to respond to any questions. Instead, Mr. Fred Mirza will respond on her behalf. Mr. Mirza, by the way, is the chairperson of the Interfaith Subcommittee of the Zoroastrian Society community. I would now like to invite Mobedyar Mahshadi to make her presentation. Mobedyar Mahshadi.
Hi. Good afternoon, and thank you for the very kind introduction. It is my absolute pleasure and truly an honor to have been welcomed into your homes today via Zoom. I would like to share my screen just to make sure that it does work. Sorry, I don't know why. I don't think I have permission to share my screen.
I see you as a co-host, so you should be able to.
Yeah, I just got the permission. Thank you so much. Are you able to view this?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. In the name of Abda, the one without beginning, and Abi Anjam, the never-ending creator, I will commence my session on spirituality and spiritual experience in Zoroastrian religion. Zoroastrianism may be tiny in numbers today, but at one point in history was considered amongst the world's largest faiths that was practiced across continents and whose influence can be seen in other religious and philosophical systems, including, but not limited to, Christianity, Islam, the Baha'i faith, and Buddhism. From its birth in 1767 BC, over 3,700 years ago, a time of remote antiquity, and through the epics of three mighty Iranian empires, the Achaemenians, the Parthians, and the Sasanians, spanning over 1,200 years, the Zoroastrian religion and its proud people have had an unprecedented history. One moment, just trying. To put it simply, our religion is one of the first monotheistic faiths that was founded by the prophet Zarathustra in Central Asia. Zarathustra received revelations from Ahura Mazda, the wise god or Lord Wisdom, which outlined the purpose of Ahura Mazda and his work in upholding the order of truth, also known as Asha. It also revealed the existence of the destructive or deceitful mind, known as Angramenu, that thought to spread destructive lies and evil. The revelations were laid out through songs and poems containing the core teachings of Zarathustra, known as the Gathas. The Gathas of Zarathustra furnishes one's mind with lofty, timeless, divine, fundamental, and philosophical principles to serve as a guide throughout one's life. However, the gathas are not prescriptions or interdictions consisting of do's and don'ts, because if this was the case, it would only be relevant for its time after.
Yes.
But the gathas and the doctrine of Zarathustra are as relevant today as they were when composed by our prophet millennia ago. In fact, they are timeless and ever abiding. It is a doctrine based on the trifecta ethos of Hommata, Huchta, Hovarashta, denoting good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. The Zoroastrian beliefs, prayers, and scriptures are based on the gathas, which is the ground for spirituality in Zoroastrianism. As previously mentioned, Ahura Mazda, which also means the wise God or Lord Wisdom, is the supreme head of the spiritual world, and they are 6 divine attributes of Ahura Mazda that are as follows. First is the good mind. Second, best righteousness, divine authority. Fourth is love and devotion. Next, perfection. And lastly, a morality. So how can one achieve the 6 attributes of wisdom in Zoroastrianism? The first one, good mind, is achieved through good thoughts, which produces good words and assists in performing good deeds. The next attribute, that is the law of nature, is achieved by practicing truth, purity, honesty, cleanliness of body, mind, and soul. It is the law of nature that deals with animate and inanimate, and hence we have to sustain the ecology and environment. Third is the divine attribute of authority that is achieved by acts of justice. The divine attribute of holy devotion is achieved through benevolence, love, and right-mindedness. Next one is perfection, and it is achieved by practicing the above 4 qualities. And the final attribute is a morality, and is only achieved when the previous qualities are met. Spirituality in Zoroastrianism consists of 2 things. Firstly, being in tune with wisdom. Wisdom, personified, is the creator of the spiritual and then the physical world. And secondly, to connect with the nature and all the natural elements of creations through our prayers, and more importantly, through our actions. In Zoroastrianism, wisdom means progress and not to remain in status quo. Hence, a physical world was created in the order of sky, water, earth, plants, animals, humans, and finally fire, in order to sustain all the creations. With the creations of physical world, every creation received 2 spiritual elements. The first being the guiding spirit of Ahura Mazda, which is also known as Fravashi, and second, a soul. The guiding spirit's role is to guide the person to live in accordance with the will of Ahura Mazda. It is not affected by the actions of the person. The soul, and hence the person itself, has a freedom to choose between good and bad actions, and hence the twin spirits came into existence. One of these was the progressive and productive spirit, and its diabolically opposite was the destructive and the regressive spirit. These twin spirits have opposing roles, and it is Ahura Mazda's wish that the soul chooses the productive and positive spirit, and therefore will be rewarded in the physical as well as the spiritual worlds. However, if a person prefers to follow the negative spirit of destruction, it shall be responsible for its own actions and face the consequences. Hence, the purpose of life is for every human being to promote the positive spirit and live a life of good thoughts, words, and deeds to overcome all the negativity in one's own self in order to be rewarded in this and as well as the next world. The plain reality is that there are no good deeds without good thoughts in the teachings of Zarathustra. You see, we are left to think through what we should do.
Can I just interrupt? We can't see your screen fully. We're only seeing half a screen.
Are you seeing it now?
Yes, that's perfect now. Thank you very much.
No problem. So as I was saying, the reality is that in Zoroastrian religion, we believe that there are no good deeds without good thoughts, because we are left to think through on what we should do, and we bear the burden of responsibility of our thoughts and actions. And this acceptance of the responsibility becomes the way of life. We are left to act with good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. The recognition that you are responsible for your actions and prepared to accept the consequences is a way of life that guides us to evolve to the path of Asha, truth, and exhibits the reality of free will. Having said that, in Zoroastrianism, death is considered to be a transition from the physical to the spiritual world when the soul and the Fravashi, or the guiding spirit, leave the physical body to return to the spiritual world. The Fravashi returns to Ahura Mazda in its pure original state. The soul is believed to remain in this world for 3 days and 3 nights after a person passes away, pondering and brooding over its choices and actions during the lifetime. On the dawn of the 4th day, the soul proceeds towards the spiritual world. The soul has to cross a bridge of separator, or the bridge of judgment. A tribunal of divinities judge the soul. The religious conscience representing the action of the soul is reflected by the life led on earth. The tribunal will judge whether the soul made the right choices during the physical existence. If the choices were in accordance with the will of Ahura Mazda, then it is rewarded and will live in the house of Ahura Mazda, which is the house of endless light and music. If, on the other hand, the soul had made unwise choices, filled with lies, destruction, and deterioration of the world, then it is condemned to the house of worse existence, or the house of strength and darkness. If the soul made balanced choices between good and bad thoughts, words, and deeds, then it is ended in an intermediary spiritual purgatory. This being said, like all faith, the philosophies and tenets of Zoroastrianism is one that must be questioned and pondered upon, as concepts of faith are subjective and open to an individual's interpretation. Faith and spirituality are a subjective quality and is in many ways similar to other subjective experiences. It was said by Zarathustra that one does not need to be a Zoroastrian to be accepted. We are first each born as human beings, then an Irani or an Indian, and lastly a Zoroastrian. Being a good human is far more important than the faith one practices. Although Zoroastrianism is a religion deemed to be in decline, but a vibrant culture now gone global flourishes and thrives. Thank you so much for having me today. It was an absolute honor and privilege.
Thank you so much, Mobedyar. I'm amazed because a lot of what you say is what in the Islamic tradition we share with. And you spoke very well. It was a wonderful rendition of the Zoroastrian historical and spiritual realms. You talked of wisdom being equated with progress, that there was a need for positive spirit, overcoming negativities. That is, good deeds are rooted in good thoughts, and there was a need for responsibility. And of course, you said so much more. Was a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Great. And I'm sure Fred will be able to answer any questions that we may have. Our next speaker is a person whom I have known for over 15 years, I would say, the Reverend John Hill, him and me, and the Rabbi, Michael Stroh. We have been trialoguing, if not dialoguing, for more than 10 years now. Reverend John Hill is a member of the global community of the followers of Jesus of Nazareth. He's an ordained presbyter, that is elder of the Anglican Diocese of Toronto. He's also a student of the liturgy. He's a former diocesan interfaith officer and a very frequent contributor to Mosaic Interfaith. Reverend John, please. Go ahead. You have to unmute.
Thank you very much, Liyakat. Yes, well, I would like to begin with a few observations of my own about spirituality. There seems to be a growing interest and appetite for spirituality in our time, partly, I think, in reaction to the spiritual impoverishment of our modern way of life. Our individualism, our materialism, our consumerism, all focus our lives on personal gratification or personal comfort, leaving us bereft of any meaning or larger purpose for our lives. Every time we resort to what we call retail therapy, I think we are unconsciously acknowledging this spiritual emptiness. Some people even resort to religion for such gratification or comfort, while others reject institutional religion because it seems so unspiritual. But we can probably agree that cultivating spirituality entails practicing spiritual disciplines. Spiritual disciplines may be used as a form of escape, retreating into some invisible place of detachment and serenity. On the other hand, spiritual disciplines may be used to cultivate openness to a larger reality, a reality that includes dimensions beyond space and time, seeking a vantage point from which to perceive the meaning and purpose of our daily existence, seeking relationship with the mysterious source of all that is, seeking a truer sense of selfhood. Now, if that first kind of spirituality is a kind of withdrawal, the second form is a kind of humble aspiration for deeper engagement, the opposite of withdrawal. And if this aspiration requires an exercise of rigorous discipline, it's only for the purpose of cultivating that truer relationship to all of creation, a quest for authentic values in a conflicted world of shallow values, a quest for the inner freedom and authority to pursue such values. But I think we also need to be aware that even spirituality can become yet another form of consumerism, shopping around for the most satisfying form of spirituality. And even the religions of the world sometimes look like just another way of fracturing the world into competing tribes, while the world descends into chaos and violence, increasingly divided between the ultra-rich and the utterly destitute, and living on the brink of climate catastrophe. So, if my spirituality does not make me more compassionate, more active in resisting these destructive patterns, more committed to the common good, then what is it good for? We're often being reminded that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Well, my task today is to describe Christian spirituality and the disciplines through which you can develop this spirituality and be sustained in it. Christian spirituality has been defined as life in Christ. In fact, the word spirituality seems to have originated with Christians to describe the experience of being inhabited by the spirit of a first-century Jew, Jesus of Nazareth. That is Christian spirituality. But that doesn't just mean being devoted to Jesus Christ. It also means being devoted to what he was devoted to. And the central theme of his teaching was the coming kingdom of God. So, here's the story of how Christian spirituality arose. According to our original scriptures, which were, of course, the Jewish scriptures, the world was created by God to be a flourishing garden or forest, home to a vast diversity of creatures, including humans, all splendidly ordered to mirror the Creator's own glory. This wonderful creation was God's dominion. However, God delegated dominion to Adam because a divine human partnership would certainly be the supreme glory of this created order. In other words, God's reign over the world would not be exercised directly, it would be administered by Adam, who of course represents all humanity. Well, if you've ever tried to read those original scriptures, which Christians call the Old Testament, you will have seen how that splendid order of creation soon broke down because humans turned out to be the most defiant creatures within that order. Apparently, we prefer to treat the rest of creation as ours to exploit. Not only does this lead to ecological degradation, it also leads to human conflict and violence and the abuse of power. So, those original scriptures are largely preoccupied with stories of the Creator's repeated attempts to restore order by raising up some more responsible human partners. And yet, every restoration eventually ended in yet another corrupt and oppressive regime, a tragic, recurring cycle that we witness down to the present day. It was the prophets of ancient Israel who consistently named this corruption and condemned their own people for abandoning their covenant partnership with the Creator. So, when the Rabbi Jesus appeared, announcing that the kingdom of God, God's reign and dominion, was finally going to be established, and then began acting as if he himself was going to inaugurate it, the corrupt regime of that era saw him as a threat and crucified him, which seemed like not just an atrocity, something which the world is all too familiar with, it also seemed like a truly ominous outcome to this story. For Jesus appeared to have been the one person humble enough and courageous enough to actually be that truly faithful partner that the Creator was counting on. But the world had no time for that. But then, the story took an astonishing turn. God raised this Jesus from death into a new and eternal life amongst his people. Now, if that's hard to believe, I can assure you that the only people who originally did believe it were people who actually experienced some kind of encounter with the resurrected Jesus. And then, based on their witness and leadership, the news of this resurrection of Jesus as the Christ, the chosen one of God, this became the very foundation of Christianity. Jesus' earliest followers were, of course, shaped by his public teaching and his personal mentoring, but they were even more deeply shaped by his death and resurrection. He had taught them that anyone whose primary concern was saving their own life was actually in the process of losing it. And he himself was completely undeterred by the plots to destroy him. But it was actually the Apostle Paul, one of Jesus' earliest interpreters, who saw in the resurrection of this crucified rabbi the beginning of the end of that tragic cycle that I talked about. This Jesus, the one most truly obedient servant of God, had been raised up to be the pioneer of a new creation. Paul even referred to Jesus as the last Adam, which meant that the followers of Jesus would be able to serve creation's intended destiny through a new partnership with the Creator. By sharing in Jesus' risen life, they would become part of the body of which he is the head, what Christians like to call the body of Christ. As I said at the beginning, Christian spirituality is life in Christ. So now let me describe how Christians are able to live in Christ through the practice of our spiritual disciplines. And these disciplines that I'll describe are all implied or prescribed in the new writings which early Christians added to those original scriptures, writings that we call the New Testament. Some of these disciplines are communal, some are individual, although the distinction is a little bit artificial, as you will see. There are two kinds of communal disciplines: word and sacrament. By word, I mean the practice of listening to the scriptures systematically read aloud so that our worldview and our imagination are shaped by these writings. And for us, the heart of the Christian scriptures is the gospel in its 4 different versions: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The word gospel means good news, and the good news consists in the story of Jesus and his teachings. So, listening to the word is the first kind of communal discipline. The second kind is sacrament, by which I mean the ceremonies through which we enact our participation in the life of Jesus. First, there is the ceremony of baptism, a sacred bath or shower, which is administered to you when you're ready to make your definitive commitment to follow the way of Jesus and become a member of this new covenant with God revealed in Jesus' death and resurrection. This bath is a powerful symbol suggesting the washing away of the old life of self-interest and the drowning of all the demons that have dominated our life. The Apostle Paul even urged us to recognize in baptism a symbolic burial. In baptism, he says, you died with Christ so that you could share his risen life. The baptismal pool can even be seen as the womb of this body, the body of Christ. It's from this womb that you emerge into a new life, gasping for breath, reborn as a citizen of God's dominion. And then you spend the rest of your life growing up into the full stature of Christ himself. Baptism sets the agenda for a life of spiritual discipline. After that, Christians are regularly renewed in this baptismal covenant through the Eucharist, a ceremonial meal which begins with thanking God for the creation and redemption of the world. The food is simple, just bread and wine, the basics, which we share the way Jesus instructed us to do. Now, as I'm sure you know, shared meals have always been an expression of people belonging together. But meals are also, therefore, a way of celebrating special events together or special memories. And shared meals were a big part of Jesus' story. In fact, for Jesus, as for many of his contemporaries, banqueting was thought of as an anticipation of the joys of God's coming kingdom. So, on the night before he gave up his life, Jesus gathered his followers around the table once more and instructed them how to remember him by sharing a meal together. He even invited them to see in the loaf of bread his body, and in the cup of wine his blood. In this meal, they would be bound together in the remembrance of his death. But once they actually began to do this, they recognized him present with them at the table. And this continues to be the Christian experience. This is the meal in which our identity as members of Christ's body and citizens of God's dominion actually becomes a lived experience. These disciplines of word and sacrament may be as close as many Christians ever get to a mystical experience, but it can be a genuine experience of finding meaning, values, and purpose, of finding a truer relationship to all that is, and above all, of joy in a restored partnership with the Creator through union with Jesus Christ. I do have to acknowledge, however, that without the goal of being formed in the spirit of Jesus, practices like these can easily degenerate into celebrations of sectarian identity or even spiritual narcissism. That's why the disciplines outside of these gatherings are just as important. The individual disciplines practiced by Christians are many, but let me name the principal ones. Daily prayer takes many forms, but at the center of it is the prayer that Jesus taught us. For this prayer actually reveals his priorities for his followers. And if I read you the prayer, I think you'll see that. It consists of 5 distinct prayers. First, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Second, Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as in heaven. Third, give us today our daily bread. Fourth, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. And fifth, save us from the time of trial and deliver us from evil. Now you'll notice, of course, that this isn't just an individual prayer. It begins, Our Father. Daily prayer also includes offering prayer of thanks to God at meals. It's a kind of echo of what we do in the Eucharist. We also make it a habit to regularly reflect on some part of the gospel as a way of learning the mind of Christ. And this too is something we do with others when we can. And last but not least, we try to find practical ways of anticipating the reign of God and even planting seeds of that coming renewal. For example, listening to and advocating for those who are suffering, or serving the poor, the homeless, refugees, prisoners, or searching or sharing in the search for justice and reconciliation in the world, or resisting the lure of violence as the solution for anything, or confronting the deceits and delusions which are imperiling the very life of the earth. These are all part of learning to follow the way of Jesus. And this is Christian spirituality. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, John. As usual, wonderful. You never disappoint. I can say that very clearly. Just very briefly, you talked about the need to ask important questions that we've become so impoverished and consumerized, and that even spirituality has sometimes become consumerized among competing tribes. You talked about restoration, life in Christ, and devotion not only to Christ, but to also what he stood for. You talked to us also about the devotion to Christ and the restoration in the face of oppressive regimes, that the body of Christ also meant the spirituality and life in Christ. The symbolic meaning of baptism. You told us about the Eucharist, the ceremonial meal, and significantly at the end, the daily prayers, the 5 distinct prayers. Thank you very much, Reverend John. And we now turn to the Sikh tradition. Sevadar means a volunteer, and our next speaker is a Sevadar, Sevadar Ran we call him, who is a volunteer at the Guruk's, excuse me. Excuse me, yeah. He is a volunteer at the Gursikh Sabha Canada, also known as Kabra Gurdwara. Sevadar Ran has served as a member of the Uniformed Recruitment Advisory Committee of the York Regional Police Force. From 1998 till 2016, he was the chair of the selection board, which is equivalent of the board of directors as Gursikh Sabha Canada. Sevadar Ran also took on the role of volunteer construction manager for a $9.15 million expansion of Gursikh Sabha in Canada. Finally, Sevadar Ran is a regular participant in the interfaith community in the Greater Toronto area, a situational speaker. Sevadar Ran is the editor of a monthly magazine published by Gursikh Sabha in Canada. Indeed, a very lofty and illustrious CV, and there was much more, but I had to cut it short. So it's up to you now. We'll leave it to you, Sevadar, please. Enlighten us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Takim, fellow presenters, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am humbled by just listening to the presentations that have been made. And I am so delighted that whatever I'm going to say is not going to be much different. We talked about the spiritual language, it is the same. Not only is the spiritual language the same, spirituality is the same. So I will start. For the last 4 decades, Mosaic Interfaith has flourished as a gathering of communities for interfaith dialogue. This mosaic is a representation of our larger mosaic, which is the Canadian Society, diverse Canadian society. We will explore spirituality through different pathways in these 2 sessions. It is an honor for me to participate in this great initiative undertaken by Organization of Islamic Learning. As Dr. Takim said, I represent Gursikh Sabha Canada in particular and Sikhism in general. Sikhism, most of you might know, is one of the newest religions. It was started in 1469 by Guru Nanak, the first Guru of Sikhs. Sikh literally means a learner. For learning, I have a curiosity of a toddler. I'm interested like a child and passionate like a teenager, but I'm not an expert. Keen to learn more about spirituality from my presenters, I start with our customary salutation saying, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. It means Khalsa belongs to God, victory belongs to God. We simply act in His will, and everything happens in His will. Before I start exploring spirituality through the pathway of Sikhism, I like to make 2 points about the Sikh scriptures. One is the name of the scripture is Guru Granth Sahib. Second is that it is a compilation of 1430 pages in which 6 Sikh gurus have writings in. In addition to those Sikh gurus, there is 40 plus other authors whose writings have been included. And these authors are from Hinduism as well as from Muslim faith. Many of these authors, they have been classified in those days as untouchables, downtrodden. That was the way the Indian society was then. For my presentation, I'll be quoting 2 of them. The first one is Kabir. He was a Muslim weaver who was considered to be a low caste and untouchable. He was from the Banaras area of India. And the other one that I'll be quoting is Namdev. He is an untouchable calico printer from Maharashtra in India. I will conclude with 5 stages of spiritual journey, the way they have been laid out in our scriptures, and finally conclude with a closing remark. The fundamental postulate of Sikhism I'll lay out, and then I will tie it to spirituality. The fundamental concept says there is only one God. One here is not a numerical property. Oneness means completeness, not missing or lacking anything. Shri Guru Granth Sahib starts with explaining that one by defining the attributes of one in its start as a preamble. It is called Mool Mantra. Those attributes of God are defined as one universal creator God. Its name is truth. He is a creative being personified. He doesn't have any fear, has no hatred, is an image of undying, beyond birth, and is self-existent. And if he has to be achieved, he has to achieve by Guru's grace, Guru being someone who is learned. Sikhism believes that universe is a manifestation of one God. It manifests in 2 forms. One is called Nirgun. Untangible properties are an example of this one. In this form, he is seen as energy or a concept. We cannot touch him, feel him. This could be considered almost like the concept of potential energy in physics. And the second form that he represents himself is called Sargun, in which we can tangibly feel him. And that is the representation of our universe around us. All the beings, all the things that we see in the universe, they are a manifestation of his tangible properties called Sargun. Before the universe was formed, he was present as Nirgun. At that time, the Guru Granth Sahib says, for endless eons, there was only utter darkness. In this state, there is no space, no light, no time, no sky, no universe. It was just darkness. When he so willed, he created the world. Jataspana ta jagto paya. Kabir, the guy who I mentioned as an author in the earlier stage, he elaborates this one further, saying, first Allah created the light, then by his creative power, he made all mortal beings. Aval Allah Nur Upaya Kudrat ke sab bande. Then he further says, not only did he create them, he is present in his creation, and his creation is present in him. Khalik Khalak, Khalak mein Khalik, Pur Reo Srab time. One Lord abides in every being that is around in this universe. Sab mein Sacha Eko Soi. And Guru Nanak writes, true creation is the creation of true Lord. Since he resides as a spirit in all things, nature is sacred. Nature is not false. Nature is not evil. His presence in his creation is akin to an image in a mirror. In Sikhism, the first step of becoming spiritual is to recognize that the true Lord abides in the universe. Uniting with this all-pervading one is the destination of spiritual journey for Sikhs. Trials and tribulations of this journey take us to the treasure house of divinity that is residing in us. This is an inward journey. Self-knowledge is the key for this journey. For that, in Guru Granth Sahib, it is said, "O my mind, you are an embodiment of divine light. Recognize your own origin." And inspiration for recognizing our own origin is said, this human body has been given to you. This is your chance to meet the Lord of the universe. Pai Prapat Manuk Tevhariya, Gobind Milan ki eh teri bariya. Our human body is an important vehicle in our spiritual journey. It is important because it provides a platform to perform spiritual practices. Spiritual life has got two aspects, one of them being spiritual practices. Because these spiritual practices can only be done with a human body, it is said that even gods and angels long for this human body. But this human body is perishable. It is short-lived. So the spiritual practices have to be carried out in a short time. As compared to the body, soul is imperishable. It does not die. And it says, Maranhar e jira nahi, soul is not perishable. These days, we see a renewed emphasis on spirituality. Partly it is an outcome of prevailing dislike for religion in society. We often hear, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. This has resulted in a new focus on certain spiritual practices like meditation, yoga, mindfulness, gratitude, becoming egoless. These practices help us to calm our minds and bodies and become an important step towards general spirituality. But today our lives are driven by a desire to have instant gratification. We are short on time. We want to learn, but want to learn very quickly and also with a very little effort. One quick web search on any issue spits out plethora of quick guides, Cole's Note version of every subject that we can think of. These spiritual practical guides help us to start our spiritual journey. They do not tell us what is the ultimate destination of this journey. Even the next step after calming our minds is missing in these guides. So what is missing in these spiritual guides? Spiritual knowledge is the missing link in these. This knowledge highlights the need, means, and the goal of spirituality. All the available guides give us step-by-step details of practice to calm our minds, but they do not tell us what are we calming our minds for. Scriptures employ storytelling techniques using mythological, allegorical, metaphorical examples to support or refute a point. And reading scriptures, understanding with exegesis, provides the spiritual knowledge. With inductive and deductive learning, we imbibe this knowledge and we can use it in our spiritual journey. With modern scientific advancements, we know a lot about our bodies. We know what makes us ill. We know how to treat sickness. We can even change body parts in our bodies. Despite these advancements, we do not know much about life. We can say how we are born. We know how we die, but still we don't know what happens to life after death. Where does it go? Where was this life before we were born? So we know the characteristics of life, but we do not know what life is, or we do not know who we are. With our mental faculties, we might be asking ourselves, who am I? Am I this body? Am I this gender? Am I my profession? Am I my vocation? If I'm any one of those above, then I'm different than others. But am I really different than others? On the other hand, if I identify myself with the prime life force that is pervading in everyone else, I'm not different than anyone else. Getting rid of this I amness and recognizing the presence of the same life force in everyone is the next stage of becoming spiritual in Sikhism. The I amness indicates duality. It is an opposite of one, the fundamental belief of Sikhism. When we identify ourselves with the life force within us, this condition is comparable to the drop of water versus ocean. Just think about it. Is that drop unique or different than other drops? For that matter, is that drop different than the ocean? In Gurbani, the Sikh scriptures, another metaphor is used is that of ocean and a wave in it. Is that wave not part of that ocean? In Sikh religious thought, the life force within an individual living being is called Atma, and it is part of the universal spirit called Paramatma or the super soul. So far, the ideas have been that number one, we are an embodiment of that life force that is within us. Second is this life force is all pervading. It is in us and around us. This makes us all the same. Our soul, our Atma, is a subset of the prime soul, the Paramatma. We are drops of water of that ocean. And number three, life is a continuum of that prime soul, with our souls being the subsets of that prime soul. And lastly, because we are the prime spirit. For that, in Sikhism, Guru Nanak, the founder, laid out 5 stages of the spiritual journey. These 5 stages, they are called khands or zones, just as if a world has been divided into various zones. He divided this journey into 5 zones. The first one is called Dharm Khand. It is zone of righteous living. The second one is Gyan Khand. It is zone of acquiring spiritual knowledge and spiritual wisdom. The third one is Shram Khand, zone of humility. Humility is the real beauty here. The fourth zone and the fourth stage is called zone of getting blessed. And the last one is zone of connecting with him called Sachkhand. If we look at these 5 stages, out of those, the first 3 embody spiritual and religious practices that prepare us for connecting with the Prime Spirit. And for this, scriptures are guides for these preparatory phase. Contemporary spiritual practices that I talked about earlier, like yoga, meditation, and those, when they are performed without spiritual knowledge, they provide an ephemeral calmness, a very short-lived calmness that does not last for too long. The spiritual practice carried out in the first 3 stages of spiritual journey provide eternal calmness, a state of equipoise. We call it Sahaj. The last 2 phases are beyond practice and are even beyond scriptures. The Sahaj is being transformed into the bliss of merging of the soul with the prime soul. A drop is merging into the ocean. This act of the drop merging with the ocean is described by Namdev, the calico printer that I mentioned earlier, whose writings are included in the Guru Granth Sahib. He says, the waves of water, the foam and bubbles are not distinct from water. Jal Trang or Fein Budbuda, Jal Tepin na hui. And then what happens is, God is everything. God is everything. Without God, there is nothing at all. Now we realize that that spirit is in us and we are in that spirit. One final note, that getting to this stage is often misinterpreted to happen with death. People think that, oh, to get to this final stage of merging happens with death. It is not true. Union with him and death are 2 independent things. Death can happen without the union, and union can happen without death. With proper spiritual practices based on sound spiritual knowledge, the final stage of being in Sachkhand, uniting with him, can happen in our living lives. That is an indescribable state. Just like as if a mute and dumb person eats a candy but cannot describe. It cannot be described. It can be achieved, but not that easily. Thank you very much.
Wow, Savadar, wonderful. Thank you so much. A lot to ponder and think about. Just to let you know, by the way, this we have a very international audience. I have a friend in New Zealand who's currently watching, I see. I have a sister in Zanzibar who's also watching, and we have people from different parts of the world, from the US, from the UK, in Africa, and so on. So it's great to see people from different parts of the world joining in just to ponder and learn about spirituality, not only in our own traditions, but in that of others. Also, if you have any questions, you can pose your question in 2 ways. Either you can put it on the chat group that you see there, or alternatively, you can also send an email. The email would go to questions@islamiclearning.org. Questions with an S at the end, questions@islamiclearning.org. Very briefly, Savadar, what you told us, you talked about that there is much affinity in spirituality, that from the Sikh point of view, you talked briefly about Guru Nanak and the history and the importance of scriptures, 1,430 pages, I noted down. You also quoted Kabir, who was a Muslim sage, writing from Banaras. One God is equal to completeness. The attributes of one means no fear, no hatred. Universality means the manifestation of the one God. As you said very correctly, and I think beautifully, God is present in creation. And creation, to some degree, is present in him. All I can say so far is a lot of what you said, others have said. Islam, I know, says the same thing. You also talked of the body to be used to enhance spirituality, that the soul does not perish. We are living in a world of instant gratification. And this is from me. Somebody told me very correctly, and I think it's so true, that people want to attain the highest level of spirituality, but they don't want to struggle. It's just like everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Well, you need to die in order to go to heaven. Spiritual knowledge, you told us, needs certain things. There is the same light force, the I-ness. The duality comes when we want I-ness instead of the oneness. In other words, we should be looking for the oneness rather than the I-ness. Finally, you talked of the 5 stages of spiritual journey: righteous living, spiritual wisdom, humility, calmness, and so on. And I think that the last sentence that you made was so very spiritual and correct, that the spirit is in us and we are in that spirit. Death does not mean union, and union does not mean death. Thank you very much. And I think that this was a truly wonderful experience so far. All 3 lectures have surpassed, I must say, my expectations. Now for the next 15 minutes, it's now 3:14 Toronto time. So for the next 15 minutes until 3:30, 16 minutes to be exact, we will have a short break for Q&A. We have very few questions so far, so please do send your question telling us who you would like to respond to your question. But before that, just to put in a few words about dialogue. An essential component in dialogue is the willingness to re-examine one's faith in the light of how others relate to their tradition. In other words, when we learn about other traditions, we need to examine our own faith and re-examining of how we are connecting with our faith in light of what we have learned from others. When we learn from others, doesn't mean that our faith should become less. On the contrary, I always tell my students, I teach at McMaster University, that communication is a two-way street. When we learn from others about their faith, it actually should enhance our faith rather than reduce it. Understanding the faith of others should strengthen rather than weaken a person's commitment to his or her tradition. I had a friend of mine who was also a Christian minister, Professor Cantor, Wilfred Cantwell Smith, a truly wonderful human being and a great writer. And I recall that once he was asked, "Are you a Christian?" He was a Christian. So if you are a Sikh, I ask you, "Are you a Sikh?" The chances are you'll say yes. "Are you Jewish?" If I ask a Jew, chances are she will say yes. But Professor Cantwell Smith had a unique way of responding to such questions. He was asked, "Are you a Christian?" And you want to know his answer? He answered, "Ask my neighbor. Ask my neighbor." I thought that answer was short and yet very profound. It's very easy for me to say, "I'm a Muslim," but truly my neighbor can truly say whether I am a Muslim or not. The purpose of engaging in interfaith dialogue then is not to reach doctrinal agreement, because clearly we are different and the chances are we will differ. Rather, the purpose of interfaith dialogue is to increase sensitivity to others. This need to be sensitive to others needs or requires a paradigm shift. We are asked to embrace those we may have previously excluded or demonized. This suggests a different function of dialogue. Dialogue is not only to bring the minds together, but more importantly, in my view, to bring the hearts together. Especially after the events, the horrendous events of September 11, 2001, dialogue has become an effective act of affirmation, of listening, and of different hearts coming together. Enough from me now. So I'm waiting for some questions. There is one question that I would like to pose. This question is to Ran Perhar. If I don't believe in life after death, why do I need to be spiritual other than for feeling to be a good person by being good to others, taking care of humanity, etc. Please guide me. Did you understand the question, Rand? Or do you want me to repeat that?
If you could please repeat it, yeah?
Sure.
Please.
The question is this: if I don't believe in life after death, why do I need to be spiritual other than just for the sake of feeling good, or by being good to others, taking care of humanity, etc.? In other words, if I don't believe in life after death, why should I be spiritual?
Well, whether there is life after death, someone believes or not, being spiritual to me is value on its own. And before I even go into this question, answering this question, let me be just very clear. As I said earlier in my presentation also, I'm not an expert. I'm still a learner myself. So, I hope, the question asking person would forgive me for not giving that answer. I might not have that one, but definitely being spiritual and being a believer in life after death would be two different experiences, at least according to me.
Thank you very much. A question for Reverend John Hill. Can I be spiritual without being religious? I think you may have alluded to this, but can I be spiritual without being religious? Can I be religious without being spiritual? John?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Yes. I find the question interesting and puzzling, partly because the word religious seems to me to be a slippery word. It often seems to me to mean being part of an organization or an institution. And in fact, the roots of the word religion are in the Latin words of ligio, to bind, and meaning to bind again. So a religion, strictly speaking, is a system that binds people together. That doesn't need to be very spiritual at all. Sometimes it is. And I don't know whether I'm answering the question, but that's my challenge in hearing the question.
But can you be religious without being, can you be spiritual without being religious?
I think you can, if you, particularly if you're allergic to the word religion, as I guess I have to admit I am.
You're a religious person, huh?
I think spirituality has to do with appropriating the larger truth of what the world is, of what the creation is, yes, that doesn't necessarily involve what we usually mean when we talk about a religion.
Yeah, some would argue that you don't have to have a religion in order to be spiritual. The spiritual is a kind of a connection with either the divine or an ultimate reality, however we choose to define it. And we do not need, because religion is more often associated with rites and rituals and the outside, whereas the spiritual is the inside of the inside. Another question here, which looks more of a comment than a question, but I will ask it anyway, to all the three speakers so far. This concerns life after death. Is there a journey of the soul, and is it connected to the day of judgment? The question is to all the three speakers that we've had so far. If you can address that, please, however briefly. We'll start with Fred, because Fred hasn't spoken yet. Are you there, Fred?
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I can definitely answer that question. I think it was addressed by Mobedyar Mahshad in the presentation, but in Zoroastrianism, we do believe of a journey of soul after death. And in fact, we believe that that journey begins on the dawn of the fourth day, and in Zoroastrian, death is parting of the soul from the human body, essentially a transition from physical to the spiritual state. And on that dawn of the fourth day, as it was mentioned in the presentation, is when the tribunal judges the soul on its life on earth, and a decision is made accordingly. That's a Zoroastrian concept of death.
Thank you. Briefly, Ryan, from your perspective? Oh, you need to unmute.
On this one, I shouldn't say we, I should be saying me. What I believe is that like death means the body is getting out, or the soul is getting out of the body, called soul or spirit, and is merging with that one. I don't believe there is any transitory stages in it. It could be instant. That's my belief.
Reverend John.
Thank you. One of our difficulties is we don't have witness from somebody who has crossed that divide. So
Don't?
I have to admit that Christianity has often been far too dogmatic about what happens beyond death, acting as if, or talking as if we had it all mapped out, and I'm afraid that's not so. What Christians do rejoice in is the fact that God did not abandon his servant Jesus in death, but raised him up. And Jesus himself once addressed this question when someone asked him if it wasn't rather a ridiculous idea. And his answer, in effect, was to say, do you think God would ever abandon his friends? That doesn't say what it would mean. It's a matter of trusting God who loves us. The way he said it was, the scriptures talk about the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. This is the Jewish scriptures, of course. Do you think God is the God of dead people?
Interesting.
So one other thing I should say about Christianity is that it doesn't talk about immortal souls. It talks about the resurrection of the body. I just can't tell you what that's like because I've never been there.
You're not the only one. Another question. It doesn't say who to, but we'll pose it to Fred. What does it take to be spiritual or to become spiritual? In other words, how do you become spiritual? We have about 4 minutes left.
Well, in Zoroastrianism, spirituality is basically a state of mind, your mind. And we worship wisdom, which is Mazda, Ahura Mazda, a lot of creation, a lot of wisdom, where wisdom originally created, like we heard in other faiths, it was all darkness, and then initially the first thing created was the spiritual world, with the wisdom's own attributes in various spiritual forms. And from there on, wisdom being wisdom, one of the things was you cannot force somebody to become somebody or to do something that's not wisdom. So then when the soul and the Fravashi, which is a guiding spirit of wisdom, a ray of sunlight, you might say, in every one of us over here, there are these two spiritual aspects in every human being or every living being, I would say, animate or inanimate also. And that Fravashi goes back in pure state. The soul is a decision maker. So it's basically a mental state of mind. You got, as soon as you have a power to choose between good and bad, automatically it's like switching a light on or switching a light off. You have no darkness if the light is on. And that's a concept of wisdom. And it's a mental state, a polarity, a positive and negative polarity that we all have within us. And our aim in life is to squash the negativity and increase the positivity, to increase love, affection, devotion amongst human beings.
Thank you. We have a couple more minutes. I'd like to pose the same question to Rand and to John, if I may, very briefly. What does it mean? What does it take to be spiritual in your tradition, Rand?
To be spiritual is, to me, it is something simple. The fact that, the spirit that is in me is in you and everyone else, recognize that. And the second thing is recognize that that spirit is all over the place. And then connecting to that is spirituality to me.
Wonderful. Reverend John.
I think to be spiritual is to be open to God. And that means, above all, trusting God and being open to what God calls from us in life. Now, for Christians, that has a particular path, and it's really quite simply following the way of Jesus, to learn from him, to imitate him. But he himself is a model of spirituality in his humble submission to the will of God and his delight in knowing the one he called his Father.
Wonderful. Great. We have a few more questions, but what I'm going to do is keep them for the second session. So, we can merge all the questions together and we can have more speakers. So we will now go to our next speaker. This is Cantor Dr. Littman, talking about the Jewish faith. Cantors have been integral to Jewish life for over 2,500 years. Cantors give voice to the dreams and aspirations of people through musical interpretation of Jewish liturgy and shepherd both families and individuals through all the joys and heartbreaks of the Jewish life cycle with compassion and sensitivity. Although originally from the US, Cantor Littman moved to Toronto approximately 4 years ago, where she first served as a religious congregation in Toronto. Cantor Dr. Littman was a spiritual counselor at Silver Hill Hospital in New Canaan, Connecticut for over 4 years. She facilitated spiritual healing in patients across socioeconomic, religious, age, and educational lines. Cantor Littman joined Temple Heart Zion, which a lot of us are very familiar with, in July 2020, where she is currently thriving. She connects with members, educates children, and leads prayers with a beautiful voice, despite the pandemic, I'm told. So, Cantor Littman, can we have your presentation, please? Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really a wonderful pleasure to be here with you all, and I'm learning quite a bit as well. So for thousands of years, humanity has passionately pursued the truth with a capital T, the ultimate answers to life and the universe. As humans, we search for the answers to what we often call the soul questions. Who am I? What do I want? What is my purpose? What's the meaning of life? There have been two foundational routes to discovering these truths, which we know, religion and spirituality. And although they have many similarities, there is a relationship between the two. There are differences as well. Practice of religion does not necessarily mean one has a spiritual practice and vice versa. Unlike many other religious traditions, Judaism does not necessarily have a specific path or practice to spirituality. Although there are a wide range of spiritual orientations within Judaism, there are some core features that they all seem to share. That Jewish spiritual practice is less the experience itself than what we do with it. Spirituality is subjective, in that spiritual experiences are largely internal and different for everyone. It is focused on practice and experience rather than text, dogma, or law, though all of those three can be spiritual as well. I like the following metaphor to demonstrate this idea. You can no more understand spirituality by reading about it than you can taste a recipe by reading a cookbook. Jewish spiritual practice, in particular, is often social, communal, and relational. From a congregational prayer to the marching for social justice, or as Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel once called it, praying with one's feet, to rectifying one's ethical conduct in perhaps the spiritual practice of Musar. Both the context and the truth of spirituality are often relational in nature. It's been said that Judaism is more than rituals. Judaism's more than holidays. It's more than keeping kosher. Though these are certainly important, Judaism at its best is about building on a millennia of tradition to actualize the qualities that are most needed to healing the self and the world. Tikkun olam, the fixing of the world. Justice, equality, and dignity. Spirituality focuses not on a narcissistic moment of feeling good, but on transformation and truth. The best way to check the validity of a spiritual experience is to see what's changed afterward. Am I kinder? Am I more aware? Am I open or more open to empathy? Jewish religious tradition is sufficiently flexible and creative to allow, as it has done for thousands of years, new efforts aimed at spiritual development. There's been several that have emerged just in the last few decades. According to Richard Samuelson, professor at California State University, San Bernardino, in the past few decades, the word spiritual and the concept of spirituality seem to have become increasingly common. This seems to be a reflection of a new age culture, and as I suspect that its idea of the spirit and the spiritual might not be congruent. If memory serves, there was once a line of argument, or perhaps merely a cultural bias, that downplayed the spiritual side of Judaism. Of course, in the Hebrew Bible, one reads about the Spirit of God, and there are verses like, "Not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit." Yet there is nothing like the Christian's Bible's declaration that God is spirit. As I said earlier, Judaism, unlike other religious traditions, does not clearly define the word spiritual. On one hand, Judaism is sufficiently flexible to distinguish spiritual from words like belief and faith. Judaism is also sufficiently broad-minded to allow one to assume that a spiritually sensitive person can or should be an ethical one. However, being a spiritual sensitive person and an ethical person are not necessarily the same thing. In addition, Judaism doesn't connect being spiritually sensitive to spiritualism, communication with non-world entities, or receiving communication with, quote-unquote, the other. It's true that our prophets and sages traditionally prayed for inspiration, guidance, and assistance. However, in Judaism, there's not only one way to perceive God or to develop oneself spiritually. Clearly, study, prayer, and focus are the suggested traditional ways. The Hasidim 200 years ago added experiencing joy and appreciating the wonders of nature to this definition. And other schools of Jewish mystical thought have developed their own esoteric rites and customs, of which time wouldn't allow me to get into further. But none of them are exclusively right or wrong. Not surprising, and perhaps as a counterbalance to those who were ritually more observant, our tradition is replete with stories about simple people whose pure heart and ethical behavior took precedence over ritual observance and Torah study. While a number of paths to leading a spiritual life exist in Judaism, too many people ignore them and simply reject Jewish life for another philosophy or religion or spiritual discipline. This is in part a reflection of the clergy and other professional and lay leaders' failure to understand our people's longings and to more fully explain to them the multiple spiritual options that already exist in our own tradition. The more liberal movements of Judaism, conservative reform, reconstructing, or formerly reconstructionist, renewal, etc., they're broadly based, those that are broadly based in pluralistic community, could be the ideal venue for these pursuits. The numerous options for self-exploration and development through study, social action, ritual engagement, as well as regular prayer, make us the ideal facilitator for the person who wishes to become spiritually engaged. Of course, given the subjectivity inherent in spiritual practice, what that truth is varies so much from person to person, specifically the contextual frame, content, and meaning of spiritual experience. And this is true for all religions. For example, many people define the truth of spiritual practice in theistic terms. Someone might say that they feel close to God when they light the Shabbat candles, or they meditate, or they hear the blowing of the shofar. For others, the truth may be non-theistic, at least as conventionally understood. For this sort of person, Shabbat candles may arouse feelings of compassion or wonder, meditation, a sense of gratitude, and the shofar a sense of connectivity to the primal rituals of the Jewish people. So what makes Jewish spirituality specifically Jewish? So to follow are three possible answers. First, and perhaps the most obvious, it utilizes Jewish tools and topics for spiritual practice. One could have a lovely spiritual experience lighting candles on Thursday night, but lighting them on Friday night grounds the experience in Jewish folkways, community, and the Jewish calendar. For me personally, that's what deepens the experience. My grandmother did this, my mother did this, and so do many of my friends and fellow community members. We may have different ideas about what we're doing, but there is a meaningful bond in this shared ground of practice. Of course, for some people, this bond actually may feel like baggage. Someone oppressed by their traditional upbringing and its rigid restrictions may find more joy and connection without that specific bond. Second, Jewish spirituality has some distinctive characteristics. Unlike some forms of meditation, for example, it tends to affirm and incorporate a wide range of emotional experience. The Buddha sits in equanimity, the Chassid dances with the ups and downs of life, and unlike monastic asceticism, which has only rarely occurred in Jewish communities, most Jewish spirituality embraces the sensual world of eating and dancing, intimacy, and so on. For traditionalists, that embrace may still be constrained by law. But even in such cases, one rarely, though not never, finds in Jewish contexts a total transfer of the material into the spiritual. Embodiment remains in all but the most abstruse of Jewish mystical practices, as does the embrace of joy, sadness, ecstasy, thinking, feeling, basically the entire range of human psychological and somatic experience. Finally, Jewish spirituality is inevitably tied to ethics and social life. Even when, as noted earlier, the spiritual experience is personal, what comes afterward is social. Judaism is a religion tied to family, community, and society. It's notable that perhaps the mystical experience in the Bible, when Moses ascended to Mount Sinai and communicated directly with God, to see that it was barely narrated in the text. We get almost nothing of Moses' spiritual experience. What we get are the Ten Commandments and all that the law that follows. The fruits of the spiritual experience, not the experience itself. This coming down the mountain is a critical metaphor, and it reappears in different forms in the mystical experiences of Ezekiel, Elijah, Isaiah, and others. Mystics have their experiences, but what matters is what they learn from them, whether it's law or prophecy or ethical warnings to Israel. Ultimately, Jewish spirituality comes down from the mountaintop, back from the experience of the sublime. As Heschel described so eloquently, that is where Judaism begins. So before describing key factors of Jewish spirituality in order to put them into some context, I'll summarize the four fundamental components of Judaism, which could be said: Brit, covenant, we are, each of us, part of a relationship that matters, including the relationship with earth and the one who calls us into being. Second, Torah, the arrow and the bow and the flight of the arrow, our covenantal vows, the ongoing intergenerational conversation about what it means to live in covenant with God. Mitzvah, the decisions and actions that express and enhance being in covenant. And Teshuvah, the hard work, of course, of the work of correcting our wrongs if we get off track. The key factors then of Jewish spirituality could include all aspects of Jewish spirituality being deeply rooted in the revelation at Sinai. Its teachers will go to great lengths to demonstrate these roots, relating their teachings to verses of the written or oral tradition of Torah. Jewish spirituality speaks of human purpose and meaning in this world. Spirituality, our business is not to get to heaven, but to bring heaven down to earth. Is not something you do for your own good alone, but a means to fulfill the purpose for which you are created. Everything has divine purpose. Every event has divine meaning. Nothing is just here because it is here. The Jewish concept of God is at once both personal and transcendent. God is never defined. He is, or he or she, they is often referred to as the infinite light, or just the infinite. And even then, with the caveat that even this does not refer to God's essence. Jewish spirituality brings people together with love, with joy, and with celebration. Jewish spirituality celebrates life. Jewish spirituality, like all of Judaism, is aimed ultimately at that we are not seeking to rise to a higher place in heaven, but again, that we want to bring heaven down to earth. So specifically in regard to spiritual transformation, there is again not one specific approach to this. We are each on our own journey, our own unique journey. That means individuals have to make their own choices about how to best apply the tradition to their lives. Despite what some authorities say, there's no monopoly on how Judaism is best practiced. Rather, there are only divulging principles about how best to practice Judaism in the world. If I was asked where to begin building a spiritual practice within Judaism, I may recommend that people start by learning the basic concepts of midot, or character development, and musar, ethical practices. These approaches make Jewish practice tangible and immediate. These approaches are not so much about learning the minutiae of Torah principles, but about the practical application of Torah wisdom in everyday life. I always suggest to those who ask me how to be a good, more Jewishly engaged, to choose one or two practices and study them deeply and with good intent. Eventually, after internalizing these traits, then they can begin studying another. And this is really where transformation can begin. If I were to give a brief list of ways to study and practice, you could walk the path of blessings. You could pave your days with positive intentions and good deeds.
5 minutes.
You can make your contribution to repair the world, known as Tikkun Olam. Recognize the sparks of God. I was on mute. Was I on mute the whole time?
No, we could hear you.
Okay, sorry. Okay. That would have been bad. So I was saying ways that we can walk the path of blessing, walk and study Jewish spirituality would be walk the path of blessings, pave your days with positive intentions and good deeds, make your contribution to repair the world, Tikkun Olam, recognize the sparks of God present throughout the whole creation, discover the spiritual benefits of observing the Sabbath, find lessons in the Torah for your daily life, learn from the wisdom of the Jewish sages. You could explore Jewish mysticism through Kabbalah, Hasidism, and Musar, or draw closer to God through rituals and holiday observances. Celebrate joy and laughter. Rejoice that the world created by God is good and meant to be enjoyed, to pursue justice in the way of ancient prophets of Israel. Thank you for having me speak today.
Thank you very much, Cantor, Dr. Littman. And wonderful talk also. I enjoyed what you had to say. In many ways, it complemented, but did not duplicate what others have said before you. You talked to us about the soul question, as you said, the meaning of life, that religion does not necessarily mean spirituality. that in Judaism, there's no Jewish path to spirituality. There are certain core features, yes. And I think the point that I enjoyed out of many others that you made was that Jewish spirituality, like other spirituality for that matter, is very subjective. You cannot just read about it and become spiritual, much like you cannot eat from a book. You can know how to cook, but unless you actually make the food, you cannot really be filled up. You talk about the concept of justice, equality, and dignity, which are key to Judaism and to Jewish spirituality. And that there is nothing to say, this I found quite interesting, there is nothing to say that God is spiritual. In fact, there is no unique definition in Judaism of spirituality. There's a lot of discussion on prayers, worships, which are more traditional, but that does not mean that there is no concept of spirituality. In fact, you mentioned that spirituality in Judaism occurs in different ways, through meditation, through the shofar, through the lighting of the candles, and that spirituality can also be an emotional experience. There's eating, there's dancing, and there's also a social life. Another interesting point that I found in your speech was that you said that there's nothing to indicate that Moses had a spiritual experience when he went up the mountain. It was more of receiving the 10 Commandments. You talk also of Judaism in terms of the covenant, the Torah, the mitzvah, being in the covenant and correcting what is wrong. It does not mean that we try and bring heaven down to earth and brings people together. The Jewish spirituality celebrates life. Thank you very much. I want to remind those who are watching, listeners, that this is being recorded. It will be put on YouTube later on after we've heard both sessions. And thank you again very much, Cantor. Wonderful presentation. And to all the presenters so far who have kept to time. Nobody has gone over their allotted time. And that's to ask a religious person, for that matter, to keep to 20 minutes is quite a challenge in itself, because people of religion like to talk a lot. I know, because I am one of them. In any case, our last speaker for today is, we are honored to have Lama Nyima Dorje. He will talk to us about the Buddhist tradition. Lama Nyima Dorje, Sherpa, received elementary education as a novice monk at the Sri Mangal Devi boarding school from 1990 to 1997 in Nepal. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. He spent 2 years learning the Buddhist root texts and ritual practices prior to attending the higher Buddhist philosophy and science Varya Vidya Institute in Varanasi in India in 1999. He successfully completed the Shedra course in 2005. From 2006 to 2010, he served as a manager at Hotel Nodrag. In 2010, he entered the traditional 4-year retreat at Nyingshang Katesh Thrangu Retreat Center in Nepal. And he was bestowed with the title Lama upon completion of the retreat. In 2016, he was appointed as the chief disciple master at the Thrangu Tashi Choling Monastery in Nepal by the Venerable Keshen Thrangu Rinpoche. Again, excuse my pronunciation. Until he decided to join the family of Karma Tekshen Zabal Ling as a residential Lama in 2019. So, Lama Dorje, we are extremely honored to have you and to hear your presentation, please.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. Takim, and thank you for having me. Actually, I'm kind of very blessed and very happy to join here. And I just heard a lot of experience, the friends who are explaining about spiritual and their spiritual journey or something like that. Thank you very much. For me, I'm when in Buddhist spirituality means spirituality is understanding the insight, as Dr. Takim also say, same thing, insight. We're talking about insight. And the other word saying like understanding the nature of phenomena or nature of mind. In Tibetan word, we as a Buddhism, we call ourselves as a Nangpa. Nang means insight. Pa means the person who is practicing that. When we talk about the spiritual, Buddha said in a Tibetan word, Digbachiyam mijashin kyawa punjum sobaji rangi simni yonsudu tene sange temba yin. Like this quote Buddha said, what does it mean by that is commit not a single unwholesome act, cultivate a wealth of virtue, tame completely this mind of ours. This is the teaching of Buddha. Yeah, that is when we talk about like spirituality, like as I was saying, like talking about inner side or not talking about external inner development with the help of spirituality, spiritual. To attain this spirituality, you need to practice that love and compassion with wisdom. Actually, love and compassion itself is not enough. With that, you need to have a wisdom. Without wisdom, love and compassion can be not so, not so useful. When we talk about love and compassion, it's really very, I think that this is the basic of every religion or every faith. The love and compassion is the basic one. We all universal, I think the word or universal practice, love and compassion. But I think sometimes my personally feeling why we what we call cannot understand, or even though we understand love and compassion, but we are not, we don't know how to apply and how to, how to start with, actually, love and compassion, when we talk about, actually, we go to monastery or we go to a different faith like temples and church and like these things. Well, we were there when we were reciting prayers, when we are receiving teaching. During that time, we thought, okay, I receive a teaching about love and compassion or spirituality or like these kind of things, But that is just... I feel that is just kind of only the word, or that during that time, maybe you can feel that. But when you out of that monastery or that, the place, or what after that? After that, we start to get involved in a lot of problems. Yeah, we start to having a lot of problems, and we have to deal with a lot of angers, we have to deal with a lot of egos and so on, kind of like these kind of things. That's why I think if you understand, if this is the case, then it's only being like love, the teaching or the prayers that only use while you are within the what we call the temple or the monastery itself. When we go away, when we go on the field, then we end up with a lot of difficulty. That means I think it's doctor, as an example, doctor gave us a prescription or the medicine, but we are the one who never use that. If you use that medicine, then you will get healed. Yeah. If you use that love and compassion within you, then you can be what we call a better person. The key of what we call the main basic of the love and compassion is the first of all, I think we need to be a better person. When I was giving that quote, like Buddha say, commit not a single unwholesome act. That means that is benefit for, that also explain three wheels of the Buddha, Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana also, like not commit any single unwholesome act. But what it means is that means not get angry, not get jealousy, not get so on, which is the problem, like this kind of things. You don't commit those kind of unwholesome act. Cultivate a wealth of virtue. What does that mean? Is cultivate with love and compassion, try to help others, try to be nice with them, try to speak nice or help, like so on. That is called with your love and compassion. Then at the same time, tame completely this mind of others, ours. That means when you do those kind of activity, those kind of things, what happened? Sometimes we end up like sometimes we say, I want to help somebody, but I think right now we don't understand that much about love and compassion. That's why we facing this kind of problem. Like giving example, if somebody is asking you for the help, what you do, as people who are sitting on the street, when we give them $1, maybe they were asking for $1 of, they're asking for money, but we are the one who offer them $1 or $5 at that time. But instead of that person, what before that, what our thought is, I want to help that person. That's why we are giving him or her $5 or like $1 or $5. But what happened is, at that moment, that guy said, oh, I don't want $5, I want $10, or $5 is nothing for me. I want $10 or $100 or something like that. Well, during that time, what happened is we end up, most of us, including me, I get maybe upset, I get more maybe frustrated, I get maybe angry, I don't know, like during that time, during that time, when you are thinking love and compassion before, when you are giving or offering, that you say you want helping him or her, but instead of that, what you are expecting, you are expecting something. You're expecting, if I give him $1 or $5, I expect him to say, thank you, sir, or thank you, madam, or kind of like these things. Actually, you are not helping him or her. You're helping yourself, kind of like this. That means your mind is not still, you didn't complete tame your mind, you didn't understand what is love and compassion. Once you understand love and compassion, then when you understand love and compassion, what does it mean by love and compassion, then you can understand. That means compassion means people who are in suffering, free from the suffering. Love means people who are happy, be them happy, and cause of happiness, they will receive cause of happiness, or like this kind of things, But personally, actually, we don't kind of very difficult, to understand this kind of things. That's why we are facing a lot of problems. And also, when we talk about problems, we always think problem is coming from outside. As an example, like if I bought the car, I will be happy. If I bought new mobile, I will be happy, or something like that, But instead of, when you get a new house, are you really be happy, or you will get more trouble? Or when you have a new phone or new car, that moment you will be happy, but later on you will get more suffer because I need to take care of. Somebody will scratch on my car. Maybe somebody will take off my car's wheel, or somebody will smash on, somebody will bang on my car. Maybe you are creating more problems than the happiness, the solutions. But first we think happiness coming from outside. That's why we are chasing towards them. Right now, this moment, people get too much distracted to what we call external things, material things. That's why, because of they can spend too much time on that. That's why right now we can see the plane can fly, or everybody have mobile on their hand. Why it happens? Why it happens? They spend too much time to develop external things. And after that, people get depressed, people get so easy to get angry, easy to get frustrated, easy to get, problems, Instead of that, if you spend more time to see the practice of love and compassion, love and compassion, I think you will face less problems, less distress or depressed, kind of like this kind of things. That's why I always say, like, we need to spend more time, because we only spend time during that prayer or during that teaching time. We say, oh, love and compassion, or like this kind of things. When you try to go back on the way, when you have to keep on remind yourself what is meant by love and compassion, what is teaching, whether that is useful or not. You need to check that also. Even our what we call the teaching also we receive, or this thing, we don't have to believe everything. We do have our own wisdom. We need to use that wisdom, then we can check whether it's useful or not. Example, if you want to buy something, you check things very well. Oh, there's if you want to buy one cloth, you want to see what is the brand, what is the price, if there's a thrown anywhere, something, we check that things, But when it comes to like go to teaching, we always get, oh, maybe our teachers say like these things, our gurus say like this is okay, not like this. We need to check. When you check, then you become more understanding. You can understand more about the things. Then when you understand more about that things, you get more belief. When you get more belief, you can spend more time on that. That's why I think it's very, very important to spend more time on that. And other things, when we wake up early morning, all of a sudden what we do, we try to watch our mobile, and we want to see the schedule, and we want to make sure today my schedule will go down. You are not planning for, did you ever plan the schedule? Today, yesterday, I get jealousy much. Yesterday, I get angry. Today, I try to get less jealous or less anger. Did you ever schedule that things? No, it's very difficult for me also, maybe for some of us also, maybe it's very difficult. Why? Because we only talk about spirituality or these things when we were in church, or when we were in a monastery, or when we were in some kind of the seminar, we just like having a religion seminar. When you are out, then we are like our spirituality things are all gone, and our like natural whatever we are, we just show our nature things. That's why why this is happening is, I think, lack of experience, or we are not giving a lot of time on that. That's why we will have this kind of problems. And after that, how do we what we practice spirituality? The part that we do have like what we call, when we practice, we do have like 10 hours, five path to spirituality. The path of like accumulate, and path of joining, and path of seeing, and path of cultivating, and beyond the training, those kind of five the path we have. When we, what does it mean by the path of accumulate married by practicing 6 paramita, that is generosity, what we call to give something, because why is giving is very important, because we have a problem, because we get attached, we got grasping. That's the place. One of the great masters say, problem is not the seeing, problem is in grasping or to get attached. When you maybe you guys can experience, while you are driving on the street. Okay, I also drive. When you're driving on the street, there's thousands of cars passing away, but you get distracted on what we call one particular, like the good car, maybe good brand car or whatever, then when you distract yourself, then you get accident, But it was not because of seeing. You saw, well, you were driving, of course, you open, you have
sorry to interrupt,
eyes open.
Sorry to interrupt, we have 2 more minutes left.
Okay, yeah. But when you what we call, the problem when you get accident when you have grasping or problem like these things. Like that is generous. We're talking about what we call distraction, or to giving to we get attachment. Attachment is the problem. That's why we need to give or offer, or like these things. After that, joining, and the path of joining, the practice of understanding nature of phenomena. Nature of phenomena, understanding to join while you are practicing. After that, seeing the nature of phenomena. When you practice on it, you see the nature of phenomena or nature of mind. Then meditate on. We need to get used to. Meditate is to get used to, to get used to on that things. And finally, when you get used to it, those things, and you don't have to put effort to practice that. When you get used to it, if daily, you don't have to what we call put effort. I need to walk or something like that. It automatically it will comes. I want to eat. You don't have to put a lot of effort to eat. It will automatically, kind of like, because we get used to. And when you get used to, you don't have to put effort. That is called, I think, enlightenment. Enlightenment, yeah. Or like these things. That's that. The last question is that spiritual transformation people personally, yeah, of course, when you have what we call spirituality, when you practice like spirituality with mindful and with awareness, then of course we can change. We know the mistake is the mistake, then we will not keep on making mistake again and again. No, not making mistake is lead to you be a better person. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lama. If I can just briefly summarize, very enriching discussion and rendition on Buddhism and Buddhist spirituality. You talked about the need to understand our inside, the nature of the mind, as you called it, that the importance and significance of cultivating virtue, that the mind has to be tamed, and the inside has to be developed. And you develop it through love and compassion. How to apply that love and compassion in order to become a better person. I love the quotation from the Buddha that do not commit an unwholesome act, as you said, do not commit an unwholesome act. That many a time we get angry, jealous, etc. As opposed to this, we need to cultivate virtue. We become happy when we acquire a new car or a house or whatever, but we end up suffering at a later period. That we put so much emphasis on the external that we can get easily frustrated, and we can lose our emphasis on the inside. As you said correctly, that we need to nurture and develop our wisdom, that we should plan our acts so that we become more spiritual. You talked briefly about the different parts, the question of generosity, and generosity is important. And I love this quotation, is because of the problem of attachment. When we are too attached, we become less generous. There's a need for meditation so that we can get used to a concept. And once you get used to a concept, we can practice it more easily. Thank you very much. Now we have about 17 minutes for a question and answer. So there are one or two questions already which are coming up. So I will pose it first to Cantor Littman. It says, can you disconnect your spirituality from how we live in our daily lives? In other words, can we be spiritual if we do not treat others fairly and properly? Is there a dichotomy between the social and the spiritual?
I think specifically in Jewish practice, the two would go hand in hand. The way that you are as a person, the way that you treat others, the way you treat even the earth itself is considered a spiritual practice and very important. Does that answer the question? Oh, you're muted.
I beg your pardon. I think what the questioner was looking at is, can you be, for example, if I am unjust or unfair to others, can I be spiritual? Or do I have to connect my ethical behavior with my spiritual behavior?
So I would, just as there are people that consider themselves religious and practicing of religion that we know do unethical things or don't treat others as you would, you should, taking in the principle of how you should treat others as you want to be treated. That's in every person's religious philosophy. There's the same that I suppose goes for spirituality. I suppose you can practice, but in essence, are you really living a spiritual life if you're unable to have ethics outside of it?
Thank you very much. The next question is to Lama. It's not really connected to your talk, but very briefly, somebody wants to have a notion of the origins of Buddhism in a timeline. Now, can you do that in 2 minutes? I know it's asking for a lot.
Sorry?
The origins of Buddhism in terms of the timeline, historical development. But again, it has to be very brief because of the...
Actually, origin of what Buddhism is, I think it's from India, yeah? It came from India. Yeah, I don't know exactly the time. I'm so sorry for that, exactly what time it is. But we also said what we call the origin, the Buddhism came from India. Thank you.
Okay. Next question for Cantor Littman, which is that you talked quite a bit about Jewish spirituality. And again, this is a very vast topic and you may not be able to address all of it. But can you tell us something about the Zohar in Judaism?
So
or the Kabbalah?
Yeah, I was going to say, so the Zohar is the main text for Kabbalah, which is an entire program in and of itself. I briefly mentioned that it is a spiritual practice. It's actually within the more traditional roots of Judaism. It's thought that one shouldn't study Kabbalah until they are mid-age, like before 50 years old, I believe, and of course male. But it was founded in the 8th century, I believe, and was basically, it's the study of mysticism. It's in studying the text, so the Zohar, you would be studying about Kabbalah, which is our mysticism, Jewish mysticism. But I'm not an expert in Kabbalah by any means, and so I definitely wouldn't do the subject much justice.
Thank you very much. This question is for Reverend John Hill. So we're going back to one of the earlier panelists, which is that if we believe in multi-faith spirituality, then why do we promote missionary work? I don't know if there's a connection between the two, but you can answer that best.
I think I'm hearing in some of the questions hidden assumptions. And sometimes those assumptions are justified. For example, Christianity worldwide has slowly been coming to an awareness that we have made fundamental mistakes. Over the last half century, perhaps, we've been coming to this awareness that what we thought was doing good was really attempting to colonize the world and make the world more like us. Mm-hmm. So when I described what I called gospel as good news, good news is something that is good subjectively. There's a story that seems good to me, and so it's good news, but to you it might not be. If I'm going to bring you good news, the very first thing I have to do is learn about you, care about what you care about, hear about your experience. I won't know what's good news for you without doing that. So missionary work has to be, first of all, compassion, love in action. And when people find in the story of Jesus the clues to a true fulfillment in life, then we will help that person to find that path and realize it. I don't know whether I'm getting at the question yet or not.
I think that, yes, you basically answered the main thrust of the question. It's a quite nuanced, I think, a bit more deep. The next question actually is for the past two panelists, that is Lama Dorje and Cantor Littman, which is that do your scriptures or any text that you have, do they indicate or say anything about the soul being judged on the day of judgment or accountability of human actions? Now, I know that Lama, they may not apply to you simply because, you talk more of enlightenment and cyclical existence. So we would like to hear what you have to say to that, and also Cantor Littman. So why did you go first, Lama?
Okay, actually, I didn't get that question very well.
The question is that of the soul being judged at the end of time. That is, would my soul be judged after my death or after existence, cyclical existence? Is there a concept in Buddhism of judgment?
When you passed away, you mean when you're dead?
That's right, yes.
But we believe in like a past and future life, yeah. We believe in past and future life. That's why I think once you didn't understand the nature of your mind, or when you still have three poison within you, you're always in this samsara. When you understand what we call three poison, when you eliminate that three poison, like anger, jealousy, or like ignorance, those kind of things, and then you kind of like understand the nature of mind. Then you, as I mentioned earlier, you need to work on it. Then you get enlightenment. That doesn't mean like we go out of this world also. That we can still born, or we can still come and serve the world also, to helping them that's why we have a great master like His Holiness Dalai Lama. We always say he's like 14 reincarnations. We believe in reincarnation, like these things.
Thank you. Cantor Littman?
So there are many, as far as eschatology, the study of what happens when we die, there are so many different viewpoints within Judaism that it would be really hard to pinpoint just one. In general, the afterlife is not spoken about until Rabbinic Judaism. So there's nothing in the Torah that contains anything about the world to come. And then within different sects of Judaism, it depends on whether or not you believe in the Messianic Judaism, where there is some judgment, people will return dependent upon their acts in life. But this is completely very difficult to give a 2-minute answer on, since there isn't one definitive answer.
I have another question for you, Cantor, which is that please explain the difference between mysticism and spirituality in 1 minute or 2 minutes.
I believe that mysticism might be a path to spirituality. Mysticism within Judaism, again, is based in the Kabbalah, which I'm sorry, I said the 8th century, the 12th, 13th century in Sfat was when it was founded. But you can be mystic in the fact that you can consider that just another word for spiritual, just to be on an unending quest for knowledge, or to see what's beyond the present. But that doesn't necessarily, one doesn't negate the other, and one doesn't necessarily enforce the other, if that makes any sense.
I think so. It's not an easy question to ask in a couple of minutes, I must admit. Final question for both Rand, Perhar, and Fred. The question that I have is that do your scriptures talk about life after death, the soul's journey or judgment day, etc.? Do you know what I mean? Is there a concept of life after death? It's closely related to the previous question regarding judgment, but this is more about the journey of the soul after death. So why don't you go first, Ren, and then Fred?
Okay, on this one, again, I qualify this one saying it is my own kind of, I don't speak on behalf of, like it is the real, Sikh philosophy, but my interpretation of it is that, first of all, the teachings are that live your life so that, you do the good deeds here, and, your judgment happens here. Mm-hmm. And if it does not happen here, then there is either good or bad, depending upon that. If it is good, you get out of that cycle of births, and because you merge with the prime soul. If not, then your soul has to come back. That's what I believe.
But Sikhism believe in a kind of coming back to this life?
Not that way. It is that it will be going into the birth cycle. It could, take the form of who knows. This time it is a human being. Next time it could be something else. But it'll go into the birth cycle.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because here, the ultimate aim is, of living a good life is to get out of that cycle of birth and death. Yeah.
Fred, you have the final say.
Yeah, sorry, I cannot put my video on, but you can hear me, so I can give the answer to you.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Sure. Yeah, in Zoroastrianism, as I said, we do believe, in fact, our life on earth is more for the afterlife. We also have a saying which we borrowed from, I guess, Christianity, or as you sow, so shall you reap. And another thing is you are responsible for your actions, and based on your actions, you are judged in the afterlife. And you can get rewarded right here on earth. As Buddhism said, that somebody said that you can bring heaven to earth, and vice versa. We do take earth back to heaven. The one difference that Zoroastrianism does not really say anywhere in the scriptures about reincarnation. It talks about resurrection. That's about the only difference I can see right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're almost, it was the end of today's program. Next week, we will have speakers from the Islamic, Hinduism, and the First Nation traditions. We'll also have all the 8 speakers come back together and give a very brief summary of what they have said, and maybe even add to what if they want to add anything. And then we'll have a more extensive period of question and answer. I hope this has been a very enjoyable and learning experience for you, as it has been for me. Before I finish today's session, I would like to remind you that we'll be using the same Zoom links and YouTube links that we used today. I would also like to thank the panelists for today, Reverend Hill, Sevender Rand, Mr. Fred, Mobedyar, Cantor Littman, and Lama Dorje. Thank you all for making this a wonderful and enriching spiritual experience for many of us, I'm sure. I would also like to thank a lot of people who are working behind the scenes, who you don't see, but who have been putting in a lot of effort, I can assure you. Hasnani Sajin, Sumaya Khaku and her father, Murtaza Muhammad Taki, Riaz Khaku and Tehsin Daya. And last but not least, the brain children of this program, they are brain children, Nurul Ain Panjwani, Mr. Raza Kimji, Najmul Damji. Thank you all for a wonderful program. Thank you again for listening, and we hope to see you again next week.